Welcome back to our final session, Emerging Issues and Product Development. I will be your presenter today. Yesterday actually marked my 34th anniversary with MSO, so I've been here a while, and used to do a lot more product development than I do now. We've got a team that's really does a lot of the heavy lifting now in all the product development that we have. So I'm not an expert in any regard, but I do thank the people that gave me some input on what their jobs are and how things are done. Prior to joining MSO, I spent about 14 years as an insurance agent employee. So I've been on numerous sides of insurance from the client needs to the company needs. So, all right. So our topic today is emerging issues and product development. Please, if you have questions or comments, please put them in the chat or the quick Q&A, and hopefully somebody will be able to read them and see them for me. So, why is product development important? Shouldn't we just use the same policies and forms that we used 100 years ago? We don't need all those crazy, to worry about, exclusions for things like mold and cyber and any of those things. Those are not important, are they? Well, obviously they are. And one of the reasons it's important is for competition. Companies want to offer coverages that are in line with what other carriers are offering so that they can grow and maintain their market share. We're going to address the needs of the insureds. What do they want? What are they looking for? Regulatory requirements. God, we all love those, all the different changes. I think they talked about that in the prior session about the automobile increased limits requirements, changing technologies. AI, what's the use? What's that going to do to how we do our jobs and how people run their businesses? Customer satisfaction. We want our customers to be happy, not just with the price, but also with the coverages. And for our strategic planning as a company, you need to plan what you're going to do. What is your market you're going into? And we will be talking about some of these items going forward. Competition and growth. Speed to market is very important for some of these new and emerging issues because when things have happened, like cyber and AI, and people have had exposure to that, they want to be able to address the issue and be able to get it done quickly. Of course, that's not always possible. It does seem to take sometimes a long time for filings to be able to be approved and to get through the process. And we'll talk a little bit later about ways that you can work to hopefully maintain a quicker approval process. Companies want to maintain and increase market share. We talked about e-bikes in the last session. Well, that's going to, if they pass regulations saying that those have to be insured, that's a potential market and a growing area. We've looked at things like pet insurance, which has exploded in the past few years. Everybody's insuring their pets for injury and for illnesses, just like they are insuring humans. And that's another one. I mean, at MSO, we are constantly looking at the marketplace and looking for ways to broaden our offerings, as well as customize programs for our member companies. We have added BOP programs for bed and breakfasts, for restaurants. We've got a House of Worship program. We have special contractors programs. And all of these things were brought up by perceived needs from companies that said, hey, we want to do this. How do we cover this? Can we put it in the basic coverage that we have now? Or do we want something special and specific to address those issues? What are the needs of the insureds? We talk a little bit about usage-based insurance. I mean, you can go out and get coverage for things that based on how much you drive your car. You get a different rate on that. You can get a different rate on other insurance. You can have it customized for what your exposures actually are. We'll talk a little bit about bi-peril rating, but now with the data and all the different areas where we can find data, it's endless. You can personalize down to the nth degree. I believe that a progressive recent auto policy filing a few years was like thousands and thousands of pages long because of all the segmentation that they had done in their marketing and their rate structure. Regulatory requirements. It's obvious to those of us on the call that complying with regulatory requirements and with what the states are requiring and what the federal government is requiring is very important. And as long as we comply with those requirements, we will be able to hopefully reduce our time to approval. By giving, and at MSO, we strive to do that. We strive to answer their questions before they're answered, to point out where we comply with regulations or where the issues might be. For one reason, you want to avoid fines. If a company is doing something that's against regulations, they are going to be subject to a fine. And nobody wants that there, or a penalty. We want the coverages and the costs to be fair for our insureds, not discriminatory. And as part of the product development process, we are following all the changing regulations and reviewing with firms like Fessel and Whirlpool, who also partner with us to tell us, hey, this is what's going on. These are trends that we're seeing. These are the new technologies. We've all been battling with artificial intelligence. How can you use it? Can you really have it do your work? I probably could have used artificial intelligence to write this presentation. Is it a good idea? Probably not, because the artificial intelligence is only as good as the information that's put in there. Cyber has been an increasingly important issue. I think every day you see people being hacked, data and people's identities being stolen. We're always getting spam emails saying, "Oh, click on this link so you can don't lose your insurance or you don't lose your credit rating or whatever they're trying to do just to get into your information and make your life miserable." Predictive modeling is also another tool that is being used to say, okay, this is what's going to happen. Because obviously, when you're writing a policy and you're writing coverage, you're looking to the future. What are these exposures going to be in the future? What are your costs going to be in the future? How are you going to need to deal with it? We talked a little bit about social inflation and litigation funding. All these concerns are brought in to what your costs are going to be. What are your claim settlement costs going to be? Are they going to be impacted by any of these other situations? Talking about changing technologies, artificial intelligence, we mentioned that a little bit before. It's a new and growing thing. Look at the billions and billions of dollars that companies are spending on trying to get their artificial intelligence capabilities up to snuff. They're not making really any money off of these technologies at this point, but they're looking to the future and saying, okay, we can do this. And you can go into Google or whatever your preferred search engine is and find anything. And the first thing that pops up a lot of times is an artificial intelligence synopsis of what the question was. And when we're looking at risks, looking at hazards, looking at new emerging issues, sometimes that's the place to find it because you don't have the data and the experience on these new issues that you would have had on typical issues. Cyber is another thing. People can access everything. They can come in and take your data, take your information, and it's an exposure that we've been increasingly adding and tightening up our language to make sure that we're not exposed and the companies are not exposed. You mentioned before about predictive modeling. Nowadays with technology, you can just throw out anything, can't you? You can find information on just about anything, and you can use this information to predict what's going to be happening in the future. The pandemic and its aftermath. Now, when COVID hit, MSO was in a unique situation because we were already working remotely. We were not one of those companies or agencies that had to scramble to figure out what they were going to do and how we were going to get our work done. So when people said, "Oh, what's going on? How are you doing with all your free time now that you're working from home?" My answer was, what free time? It's we're doing the same thing. Some of you probably weren't so lucky, and I know some people that initially at the pandemic they said, "Okay, we're going to shut down and for two weeks, and then we'll all come back to work." Well, that didn't happen, did it? So people had to scramble to be able to figure out how to do their work, how to run their business, because you can't just stop your insurance. Insurance is constant. But we were came up with new ways and ways to do their filings and do their claims handling. And I'm glad to see that everyone answered the poll question correctly, that AI is not the best way to get your work done. So, but as far as working remotely, when I started back at MSO 34 years ago, we did paper filings. You had to, type it all up, mail it in. I mean, and wait for the mail to be processed, and then get back their questions or approvals. And the time lag was sometimes very significant. Nowadays, there are times when you can put a filing in on via the computer and get the response back the same day. Not always, unfortunately, but it is possible. It has really streamlined how we've done the product development process. You can file in multiple states basically at the same time because you can copy your filings and be able to just copy all the information, which you would think, well, maybe that's great. That's giving you less work, but it doesn't always work that way. Still, it takes a lot of manpower and effort to research and develop these forms and rules. But as we go forward, we've talked about the exposures that people had. We've had to develop policies and develop coverages for people that are working remotely. Who's covered? If you're working from your house and somebody gets hurt, who's is that a work exposure? Is it workers' comp if I fall down the stairs? Is it not? Those are all questions that are still being answered today and will be addressed in our future product development things. The Internet of Things, everything is connected now, isn't it? You open your phone and you find out that your car is unlocked. So you've got all these other new exposures that are subject to either hacking or to breaking down. I personally have a fear of autonomous vehicles because as that showed in that accident they spoke about previously, if you've got in a car with no steering wheel and no brakes, what do you do if something goes wrong? If they can hack the Pentagon, they can probably hack your car. So that's just my own personal bias. Changing workplaces, we did talk about that before. People are working remotely in many cases, but it has been a pushback, hasn't there, of people saying we're going back to the office. So it's still a changing environment, and it's something we need to be aware of because we may need to address our these coverages and these changes and what's going on. 24/7 access. People want answers right now, right? They want to be able to communicate with you if they have a question or they want to make a payment 24/7. They want to be able to have an answer. So a lot of those things you can get on the website, but there are times when you need to talk to a person. So you see, yeah, they can hack the little black box too. Yes, so that all kinds of things that can happen. And where are those exposures? So they talked about that in the last session. Who's liable if your car takes you and runs you into a tree? Because you can't break. A customer satisfaction, at the end of the day, our business is our customers, and for the coverage they want to be covered for what they expect to be covered, they don't want a surprise. That's one of the reasons we have the flood warning so predominantly shown on our policies, because it's not covered and it's one of those things that many people have exposure to. And everybody pretty much nowadays is in a flood zone, even if you never were before. We've seen the devastating losses that have occurred in various areas of the country, and it's if it's not covered, they want you to be able to know that so that they can go and purchase the coverage that they need. Of course, pricing is always a key element to what the customer wants to do. They want to pay the cheapest price, but as we all know, the cheapest price does not always mean the best coverage. So we will continue to struggle with balancing coverage and pricing. And if you look at some of these policies that you may be able to get on the internet, if you look and read the wording, well, the reason they're cheaper is because they aren't as comprehensive in some cases as something else you might get. So it's very important. And we as companies that work with independent agents must continue to strive the fact that we offer the coverages and we can explain what's covered and we can do comparisons with what's covered. And that's all part of our process. We see what others are offering and we may modify our coverage accordingly. Some of the steps in the product development process: hazard exposure and identification. What is it? What is it that we need to cover? What's the issue? Either cover or exclude. How do we come up with a rate or a loss cost for a new exposure? Policy language development. You need to be able to be cognizant of the fact that when you're making a change or adding an endorsement, it's impacting everything else that you've got in your policy. And you need to be careful that there's no conflicts. Data collection and personalization. We touched on that earlier. Where's the data? It's great to have, but if it's not collected properly, or if it's not collected for what coverage you need, for example, a water damage. We had in recent years, we had a lot of issues with sewer backup. But if the sewer backup is not one of the causes of loss that you're reporting as a claim scenario, you're losing that data. You're losing that information that you could use to develop new coverages or new exclusions or new policies. Integration into existing programs. I touched on that before. We're having to change our policies, but we need to make sure that it can be worked with the existing programs. Some of the challenges in the product development process, I know this hurts some of you pretty deeply, but you can't exclude everything. We are in the business, after all, to providing coverage, providing peace of mind to our clients. The constant change with the challenges things are moving so quickly some days that by the time you file something, by the time it's approved, you need to change it. And we constantly struggle with that too. We looked at things like cannabis or other types of substances that may or may not be misused. Well, how do we address those? How do we address those? But you certainly can't list every product that could be misused, because tomorrow another one will come out. You try to list them all, tomorrow something else. You'll find somebody sniffing a Coca-Cola or something. Who knows? And the data availability, we talked about that before. If you don't have the data, if it's not logged the way you need it, it's not going to give you the information you need in order to be able to come up with a rate that's going to be adequate and fair. And that's part of the problem, part of the issue of stat reporting, why it's so important, is because we use those stats to analyze your losses, analyze the experience, and see where changes are needed. And there's always unexpected consequences. If you write a policy and you write a coverage, you think you're covering something else, but you're changing the language, and it could open up a whole new can of worms. I know that one of the challenges we had was with drones. You can't you have hobby aircraft have always been covered under homeowners policies and personal lines policies. But now these drones came up that can be used a lot differently, have a lot far more ranging area that they can be done and be done for things like taking pictures of things maybe they shouldn't be taking pictures of. Well, can you can't exclude air equipment, the hobby aircraft. You had to specifically use coverages to specifically address what's covered and what's not covered as far as a drone versus a hobby aircraft. Hazard and exposure identification. Brainstorming is always a good tool. You get together and say, okay, these are the things we're trying to do. We do this all the time with our member companies and with our team. What what are the exposures we're looking for? What's what do we see? What do we see in the news? What do we see in the claims that are happening? Where do we need to make adjustments? Trend analysis. Are these claims going up? Are these claims becoming less? What we need to be able to review that and determine from that analysis where we can make the changes. I said before, data. We need your data. We need data. And we find various different ways of finding data. Market research. What are other companies doing? What are the claims we're seeing? What are the legal profession seeing? All different ways to find out what the exposures are, what the new exposures are, and whether we need to address our existing exposures differently. Other sources of information include court cases. We had some references to those court cases in the last session, and we will be sharing some of those citations so that you can look up the court cases yourself if you want to. Claims. That goes without saying. We've got seen claims happen. Well, are they things that should be covered, or are they things we never intended to cover? You talk about something like mold. People, really didn't expect to be covering for mold, and we had companies went to the efforts to try to exclude it with varying success depending on the states that were the state regulations. And some states would allow it, and some states were more restrictive on it. Societal trends. We talked before about social inflation and increasing claim costs, and everybody's suing everybody for $1 million or $10 million or all these exorbitant nuclear verdicts, and the litigation funding just hops on that. And now with using things like AI, and people can find somebody that may have been exposed to a different to an event such a hurricane or a fire, and they can use computers and AI to reach out to all those potential claimants and solicit their business to sue whoever they're going to sue. So there's all those are parts of the things that we need to think about. Rate determination. This has been a process that has become increasingly sophistication. In fact, we probably shouldn't be talking about rates at all. It's more of a move to loss costs. And we've got bi-peril rating is an up and coming way we can provide coverage and offer rating for specific perils so that it addresses the specific exposures of fire or wind, or where are your higher hazards. Roof rating factors, that's another common and newly expanding. How old is the roof? How long will it last? What's the good construction on it? Can we how much are we going to pay for that roof? Are we going to pay to replace a 25-year-old roof with a brand new roof? Or do we pay more of an actual cash value. And how do we address that in our policy? Because obviously the insurer doesn't want you to give them $10,000 for a $40,000 roof that's going to cost them to replace. So that's one of the issues we've been dealing with at MSO. Alternative data sources. Where are you finding this information? Who? It may not just be your statistical reporting. It may be data from any kind of search engine. Go on the internet and find all the different search engines. And also the same thing with predictive analytics. People do modeling all the time as to what's going to happen. Where are we going to be in 6 months? Where are we going to be a year from now? Some of the challenges in rate determination is lack of data. You perceive the need to provide the coverage, or in many cases to exclude them. But do you need to do a credit for that? So you're trying to rush to meet the need of the client or the perceived need for society, but you don't have any data. Typically, when a new risk or exposure is introduced, we generally have to rely on how the industry is responding to account for the lack of data. A current example that comes to mind is wildfires. In the past, wildfires, people thought, oh, they only happen in California, maybe they only happen in Australia. Well, in recent years, we've seen that wildfire can happen anywhere. And it's a substantial problem, hasn't it been? Even companies that specialized in catastrophe modeling in the past only focused on California and Australia when they were collecting their data. Now, in just the US, wildfire is becoming a countrywide concern. In the past few years, companies have gotten to a point where they're creating data sets and models that allow insurance companies to assess wildfire risk at the address level. They collect data not just about each property, but data from the surrounding areas, fire response time, potential for smog, ash, pollution, all the unseen circumstances, and other variables that can be used in rate making and underwriting to gauge a risk. And wildfires will actually be a topic of our May webinar next year. In rate making, data is everything. The decisions we make require either historical data or simulated data that we can analyze to compare one risk to another. We're seeing happen with wildfire anytime there's an emerging issue in the insurance industry where there is a lack of data, where there's always a rush to meet the need. Companies that make the best use of this data and incorporate it into their existing rate-making process are likely to have more accurate loss costs that better reflect their risk, which is kind of what we're all looking for, right? We want to adequately reflect the risk. We want to charge enough to pay for the claims that come in, but not charge so much that the insurers feel they need to go elsewhere. Policy language development. We talked about drones a little bit before, about how the issue was you can't just say, oh, we're covering drones or we're excluding drones because of the definitions of aircraft. And we've seen that with other types of definitions. Some commonly used words that we always said, okay, in the past always said, well, you just go with the common usage. Well, maybe we need to readdress that. Maybe we need to re-examine what words are defined and what words are not. As we said before, you can't define every term, but sometimes it may be for clarification. For example, the word household is not defined in most policies. Well, who's your household? Is it your kids that live with you? Is it your kid who lives in the house next door that you own? Is it your friends that are staying with you? Who's the household? Is it the live-in companion that you have for your taking care of your parents? Who's the member of the household? Same thing with resident. They live there part-time, maybe they live there full-time. These are questions that we need to address and think about. Cannabis is another lovely topic because there is so much going on with it. It's still not legal on a federal level. So how can you provide insurance for something that's not legal on a federal level? How do you address it? How do you address there's exposures there? You've got these big mostly cash businesses that have the exposure, have the risks, and have the normal business exposures, not even looking at the cannabis exposure, how can you provide coverage for them? That's an ongoing issue. The market is expanding, but it's still something that's a problem. Sex and human trafficking. We've seen a lot of this in types of things like hotels are being sued because that's where the human trafficking, the sex trafficking was happening. How do you address that in your policy language? Is it covered? Is it not covered? Is it illegal? Illegal activities usually are not covered, but how is it addressed? You've mentioned cyber before too. It's out there in everyday life. Is something that we have to be careful of, be aware of. Are you clicking on the wrong link? Are you clicking on the wrong email? Is your data being stolen? We've had multiple incidents of somebody getting an email saying, "Please transfer money for this project to this project," and the email got hijacked, and it was really from somebody else who, once the money was transferred, split it out all over the world, and the money was gone. And this happens, millions of dollars is lost. So verify, verify, verify. If you see something that looks strange, if you're not sure, use a way that you can verify that it's true. Either call the person or use a method that you know is secure. Don't just say, "Oh, my boss sent me this email that I need to make this payment. I'm just going to do it," because it may not be what you should have done. We discussed before the importance of stat reporting. Everything is becoming more personalized. You can talk about how much you need usage-based insurance. How far do you drive? You say you can put the little things, and I know they have the things in the car where they can tell you how far you drove. Now everything's computerized, and I'm sure that's all stored in the computer in the car that says you drove this far, you drove this fast, because it tells you what the speed limit is. When you turn on your car, you see what the speed limit is in the town where you are, and if you've got your Google Maps on, it tells you what speed you're going and whether you're going above the speed limit or not. So that's all data that is probably going to be accessed if there's an accident or a claim. So, but the more data you can get, the more you can personalize you down to the different exposures and personalize the coverage for the individual or the company. Integration into existing programs. As I mentioned before, once you put together a new policy coverage or a new exclusion, you have to go back into all the other policy forms that you have to see how this is going to mesh. You don't want it to be contradictory because anything that's unclear is going to be judged in the favor of the insured. So I mentioned before about the drones and the language and the hobby aircraft, and that took some doing to figure out what's the best language so that we can specifically show what we want to cover with drones and not take away the coverage for the hobby aircraft that people have had for forever. So I'm glad you all feel a little smarter than you did yesterday. I don't know if I do. I think so, maybe. Artificial intelligence. I'm sure that many of you have been using artificial intelligence in one way or another. I know that there are regulations coming out on pretty much a daily basis for the insurance departments. I know New York is particularly interested in artificial intelligence and cyber and those kind of regulations. So they kind of have taken the lead as to their regulations, and I think a lot of the other states have followed as to how these things can be used. Because there's a danger with artificial intelligence, isn't there? Because where's the data coming from? Who programmed it? I mean, how many times have you if you looked up something and artificial intelligence gave you an answer and it was not right? So we as a an MSO, do not use artificial intelligence in our product development process. We might use it for some research or whatever. But for as far as putting together policy forms or putting together those kind of things, we do not. We do use artificial intelligence when we put our articles and on the YouTube. We use that to help so that I don't have to sit there and read every one of my articles and for the recordings. We use them for our recordings, but it's not creating new language or new material or new content. It's just repeating content that we've already created. But AI can be used in claims, can it? We talked about trends and data, and you can see, well, if you've got those accidents, the fake accidents or the stage accidents, and if you're seeing a trend for a lot of addresses that may have been address that may have had a lot of claimants, you can use that. You can use it for underwriting. Can looking at trends, looking to see what the information is that you have for processing and for customer service. You can use it, but we have to be judicious in how we use it. As far as customer service, you now can have 24/7 people can call and come into the website or call and get a robot to tell you an answer. So, but it just have to be careful that the robot has the proper information to be answering what you need. And there should always be an access to or option for a human. I don't know if you're like me, but if you sit there, you sit trying to get an answer from something, and you go in the loop. And you go in the loop and you ask the question, and they say, "Oh, can you rephrase that? Oh, can you just let me speak to a human?" Obviously, this is not something that this is programmed for. But even for underwriting, you can look at trends and see what similar buildings are insured for, what their values are. Does it jive with what they're asking for on your app? So there are numerous ways it can be used. Has have any of you been using artificial intelligence in your jobs? You may yes, no. Vicky argues with ChatGPT regularly. Why doesn't that surprise me? So yes, some of you have, some of you haven't. It's still a growing thing. We talk about, artificial intelligence and all the money that these companies are building to be able to use that, and all the data and all the electricity, and that's your other exposure, all the electricity that's going to be needed to run these data centers. And where are we going to get that from? And how are we going to get them? So it's even though there's nobody's really making money off of artificial intelligence now, it's a big business. Problems coming from artificial use of artificial intelligence, copyright. I mean, if you go in there and say, "Okay, write this article for me, or write this policy for me," and it's taking a picture or article or wording from something that is copyrighted, you could be liable. You could be sued for using it. I mean, we've had instances not with artificial intelligence, but with people's copying material that was copyrighted and said, "Oh, we're going to use this for our own policy." No, you're not. Bad facts. As I mentioned previously, all this data and the answers that you're getting from artificial intelligence, the information has to be entered somehow. And where is it coming from? And are the facts bad? We see that a lot of times. You see claims that make absolutely no sense, but still go through because it's bad facts. Data privacy. We've got all this data flowing all over the place. We've got cyber hackers coming in and trying to steal it. You've got artificial intelligence going in and picking up information. What are the privacy concerns? Bias. We talked before too about who's entering the information. Do they have a bias? I mean, we all have biases to some extent, don't we? And regulatory challenges. We talked before about the fact that insurance departments and states are coming up with regulation for the use of artificial intelligence. just to be sure that it's not misused, that it's not going to be injurious to our clients. And that's still an ever-changing situation, which is why it's difficult for us to deal with and decide how to use it because the regulations and the marketplace are changing. Metric insurance. This is another newer type of insurance that people may not be familiar with. Any of you familiar with parametric insurance? Well, you'll be a little bit more familiar with it now, maybe. You're seeing no, no, yes. So think of the word parameter, and that may help you to understand a little bit better about what parametric insurance does. We'll talk about how it works, a little bit about a comparison with the traditional insurance, and we do actually have some case studies of to give you a better feel for how it works. I find it interesting, and in many cases, for such as, excuse me, catastrophes, excuse me, they it's a really good way for people to get insurance who may otherwise be uninsurable, not be able to afford an earthquake or flood or some kind of insurance. And this parametric insurance is a pretty interesting topic, or not. How it works. Basically, with parametric insurance, this is really a real high level overview. This is not digging down in the weeds. We could do that in another session. It's an immediate payment for a predetermined amount when defined parameters are met. So, for example, if an earthquake magnitude 7.0 hits, we will pay you $50,000 or $10,000 or $100,000. There's no claim forms, there's no adjustment. It's this happened, so you're getting this money. Comparison with traditional insurance. There's a payout trigger is a predefined event. Maybe it's the wind speed, maybe the temperature, maybe the earthquake or the size of the wildfire. It's not necessarily any physical damage or financial loss required because when there's an event like this, you may not personally have been injured or damaged, but you're going to probably have expenses to be able to continue your operations or to get your household back up and going. So that's kind of interesting. The claim settlement speed can be within days rather than waiting weeks and months. It's a pre-agreed payment amount as opposed to going and adjusting, finding out what the value would be. And it's automatic. Of course, it's limited to the scope of coverage. Many times it's a specific event, specific type of peril, like, for example, earthquake or flood. And as opposed to traditional insurance, where you have a broad number, or the old all risk coverage, what we're not allowed to say anymore. But it is highly customizable so that you could purchase a coverage and say if there's a windstorm at a certain amount of speed and I will get a certain amount of money. This comes into things we'll look in a minute, things like crops and farmers. They have use for parametric insurance. So here's some of the case studies that we have. And I put the link in here because it is a pretty interesting scenarios, but these are all partnerships with Lloyd's of London. Jumpstart will pay $10,000 to policyholders that are impacted by an earthquake. They don't have to have damage themselves, but they may have expenses that were caused because the earthquake happened. Stable is another partnership with Lloyd's. They pay out when market prices on commodities fall. Think about milk. The rising in beef is probably another thing. I think beef prices are going up rather than down, but milk prices may go down, and this may subsidize the farmers who are not making, because it still costs them just as much to grow the cows and to feed them and to milk them, but the variety of pricing that they can get from it and income they can get from it can be changed dramatically. Mateo Protect is another one, and they pay for extreme temperature change. Think about things like wine or other types of crops, oranges in Florida when they have the freezing. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to get some money back for for those kind of events? Olives is another temperature sensitive type of crop. So they buy this insurance and then they'll get a certain amount paid out for them if there is a temperature change or if there's a market price falling. So kind of an interesting thing that maybe many of us have not seen before. Some other issues that come to mind, cannabis and THC drinks. I know in Rhode Island now they're having all kinds of issues about it because they're allowed to sell THC drinks over at bars. We'll talk about a little bit about the economy and its impact on product development. Bi-peril rating we've talked about, and blockchain are some other issues. So THC and cannabis, I don't know how many of you tested or tried either of these, but with the reaction for a THC drink may be delayed from what it is would be with alcohol. It's also unpredictable how it may impact and affect somebody. There are limited legal standards as to what can be served and who's going to be exposed. And it's not covered under liquor liability insurance. So that's kind of what they're talking about now is they got how do you determine whether it was the THC or the alcohol that caused the impairment, that caused the accident or caused whatever to happen. And it is an ongoing issue in the state of Rhode Island. And I'm guessing that it will probably be in numerous other states. By peril, we did talk about this before, but it's individual peril assessment. It's very data driven based on each peril and the losses and the exposures. But it does have an increased accuracy. You can actually be charging people the consummate rate for that works for their peril that they have. They may have a very high fire peril where they are, or a wind peril, and that coverage is going to be more expensive rather than having a broad overarching loss cost. And blockchain, I still don't understand it. I'm sure some of you probably don't either. But insurance companies may be using this for secure storage of sensitive data because it is secure. You can't go, allegedly cannot get into it without the codes and the keys that you need. So perhaps that would be a good use of it for our industry. Main presentations. As promised, next year we'll be doing 5 webinars with a total of 10 CEs, and we may do others. In March, we'll be doing 3 hours of ethics. April, roofing inspections and coverage for 2 hours. May, wildfires, what to know and what to do. Obviously, a very topical and timely topic. And in October, AI and insurance, what insurers need to know, which of course will be determined probably on October 13th is what they want to talk about. But we will put together an overall outline for it. And November 17th, we'll do another 3 hours of emerging issues. Anybody have any questions or comments on today's presentations?
Hey, Sue, a couple questions on roofing. One was on materials, and sorry that I didn't interrupt you when you were back on that, but you were talking about the changes in roofs, but also they're talking about the materials change in quality, but that about the life cycle of them and how that's going to be handled and et cetera. So maybe you want to speak to some of that.
Well, I know Mary's more of an expert than I am, but I know that you see on TV now all these advertisements. I know where I am of people that put the coating on the roofs to supposedly extend the life and make them more
Perfect example.
flexible. You
Yes.
know, and you sit there, and my husband looks at me and goes, "That's crap." I said, "Okay," because he's the scientist. But yeah, you don't. And is a metal roof better than an asphalt roof? And does it depend on where it is and what the climate is where the roof is? Yeah, those are all issues of and how long are they going to last? Because were saying, they were saying, oh, 50 years. Now they're saying, well, maybe it's only 15 years.
10 years. 10
Yeah,
years.
10 years.
Yes. Um, Well, it's
And how do
also
you insure that? And how do you cover that? Because nobody wants an old roof.
right.
Coverage for an old roof for if they've got a, or even when you have a maybe a damaged roof. When I had a hole in my roof from Superstorm Sandy, they said, "Well, we're only going to repair the area, and we're not going to replace the whole roof." So, and I'm sure there were plenty of companies and cat people that replaced the entire roof. So that's a there's significant difference of an $800 claim versus an 10 to $15,000 claim.
Exactly. On the insurance application too, for years, carriers really weren't asking anything about roofs, so that there's a lot of
Mhm.
problem with the gathering of the data. Maybe another place when you were talking about data, 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 really,
Yes.
really important.
Right, just inspecting the properties and knowing what you're actually insuring. And all the goodies you find out when the trampoline and the wild dogs and anything else that might be in there that you weren't expecting to insure, or the 16 people that are living in the house with them.
Known caller.
So, there any other
So,
questions? Yay.
hey, Sue, let me jump in and just say we had a great attendance for all the days, and today in particular for the sessions. Sue did a great job. Obviously, great support inside it. MSO and Mary and Cassidy are on, and there is so much work that goes into these, but really appreciate all the hard work Sue puts in, and 34 years, that's over 3 decades. Now, that sounded longer. So, but Sue is a great resource here at MSO and has built a great school. So we're excited about that and so forth. And we're excited to be changing, as Sue mentioned, to a CE based approach to all webinars next year, with the hope that that will align with what all of our the wonderful people that sponsor us and all of the great attendees. So I want to say thanks to all of them along with the internal staff. So, but Sue, emerging issues, it was excellent. So if I leave
Thank
it.
you. I'm glad it's over. It's doing the presentations and then actually doing them is good. But thank you, Cassidy, for being behind the scenes and putting up all those polls and all the links, and Mary for all the advertisement and the LinkedIn posts. She's happy that's over because she doesn't have to put any more LinkedIn posts up for me. The recordings will be available. Some of them are already, I think, may already be available, but today's will be as well. If you need CE, make sure you sign the affidavit of attendance. I know a couple of you had issues in the beginning, and I've got that. We do save a copy of the chat, so we'll take that into consideration. And I've got the attendance list, so I know who was here and who wasn't here. So we do appreciate your support. We'd love ideas of topics for either articles or more presentations. But we appreciate your support and
Happy
coming. Thank
Thanksgiving.
everybody. It's happy Thanksgiving.